Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Sport for a special edition of our F1 show. And tonight we are previewing the new season. F1 2022 is here after 3 months of still wondering what on earth happened in that final race that decided the classic championship between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. It was the Dutchman that went home with the crown to stop Hamilton's dominance on the track. But 2022, Hamilton is back, Verstappen is back. Will we see something similar again? New regulations, all sorts of changes this year. The car looks sexier as always, and I can't wait. And I've got my good friends of Jack Price, Conor Porter, and Liam Bond to talk about the F1 for the next half an hour or so. I mean, you've all had your drive to survive, folks, but really, I bet some of you are waiting for the race to begin now. Yeah. Yep.
that's a proper way to start the show. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's been. I wouldn't say it's actually been the longest gap, to be fair. Obviously, we've had the worst ones, I think, in 2020, obviously, where we had to wait really until June and July when it first kicked off, because obviously when the pandemic started. So it actually, for me, hasn't been a long time, really. Obviously, we've had the testing 2 times now in Barcelona and Bahrain last week as well. So we're now starting to get into it, and obviously there's a lot of new stories that have been going around recently as well, of course, in terms of like Kevin Magnussen's return to Formula One as well. So I think all the news stories, obviously, as you get closer and closer to the first race, all start to heat up. Of course, we've seen all the new car designs as well, and the new liveries for this year. So yeah, proper excited for the first race of the season now, and to see if these regulations that we've been waiting for now for the last couple of years are actually going to make a difference in terms of racing as well.
I think that's the scary thing, Conor. You know, this has been 5 years in the making of all these new regulations, and the whole point of it is so the cars can get closer together and have more competitive racing. So it must be quite nerve-wracking for these rule makers come Sunday to either see it work or go an absolute flop. How do you see it going with these new regulations?
Well, from the tests that we've had so far in Barcelona and Bahrain, you know, we've had quite a few surprises in terms of quick lap times and things like that from most of the teams, and it really looks as though there's less of a bottom feed of the team now, and more of a congested midfield, I would say. Like Haas and Williams both look like they've taken a step forward. But then again, we have to be careful when looking at these testing times, because simply put, we don't know how much fuel they've got in the car at the time and how many changes could happen between now and, or between testing and the race at the weekend. So we'll have to wait and see. But ultimately, I'm quite encouraged by some of the test times that we've had over the 2 tests in Bahrain and Barcelona. And as a result of that, should make for exciting racing. And that's down to, I think, the changes to the cars that they've made in the off season with the new regulations been put in place. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the season, and hopefully we get some more exciting races to come in.
Fingers crossed. Go on, Liam.
Sorry, Joey. I was just going to say, I think as well, there was some promising trials between a couple of the drivers when, especially between, I think there was Gasly and Hamilton. The last one just tried overtaking each other a few times, and they said that it was promising going close to each other. I think one of the big key features, though, will be how good Pirelli's tyres are as well. I think a couple of the guys have mentioned that although the following behind each other's cars are going to be a bit more easier, I think they're a bit wary about how well the tyres are going to be going there.
I mean, actually, let's talk about the cars. And I'd like to ask you quickly, what is your sexiest car out the lot? Liam, let's start off with you. What's your favourite?
Oh, I think they're all really interesting, and I think one of the big things is that they're all quite different, and I think not many people are expecting that. For me, I do like what Mercedes have done with the side pods. It's quite innovative, interesting. But I always like a Mercedes anyway. I think other than that, I think you've got to say the Ferrari's looking really nice this year. So yeah, they're probably my top 2.
Jack, I know you like sexy cars. You own a Jaguar. Sadly, they're not as good as they were in F1 all those years ago. But what is your favourite out of the 10 cars available on the track this year?
I don't normally say Ferrari, but they've got a nice color scheme this year. I quite like the difference. It's a different shade of red this year, so I think that's quite a nice looking car. But I think when the photos were shown and the launch was revealed, I have to say that Aston Martin looks even sexier than it did last year. The color scheme and yeah, how it looks as well. So I would probably say Aston Martin in terms of like the best looking car this year. But
I was going to say, forget FHM. You know, I mean, all we need is to see an Aston Martin week in, week out on an F1 track, and we're sorted. Conor, I know you like the Mercedes car most of the time. I'd like to think, but is any out there that you find really good? I mean, that Mercedes car, I kind of miss it being black. That was a cool addition car for those last 2 years.
Yeah, the Mercedes car looks cool. I think it's quite cool to see Oracle back as a title sponsor for Red Bull.
Yeah,
just reminds me of the days of Sebastian Vettel winning the titles all those years ago. And another one as well, of course, is BWT back as a title sponsor again once more, bringing back that pink into the Formula One grid. Reminds me of the good old days with Racing Point. Of course, we're going to get that pink car for the first 2 races of the season in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how many of the commentators accidentally call the car Racing Point, and if I ever crop up to call up the car Racing Point when I'm talking about it as well. So, yeah, we'll wait and see. But yeah, it's nice to see those 2 title sponsors back, because it kind of brings back memories of Formula One history. So yeah, it's nice to see those 2 title sponsors back.
I still think Alfa Romeo Sauber, so I hear you. It's getting used to the new ones, but it'll never happen. Anyway, I just thought before we go on about the new season, last season, that last race, a lot of us were kind of shocked and surprised by how the way the people who ran the race concluded it. How do you lot feel 3 months on? Michael Massey, no longer a race director, so let's just say Toto Wolff's responded back to him and going, yes, FIA, that was so right. So yeah, I'm sure he'll be delighted with that decision. Christian Horner probably not, but Liam, I mean, I guess the changes had to happen. I mean, the way it concluded, I still think they could have done a red flag and ended it with both of them going for it on the last lap, and you know, both cars having the same tyres just to make it fair, but instead it was not the way it wanted to go.
Yeah, I mean, the FIA have come through and they've said that they've made changes, and it looks like obviously Michael Massey's gone as the director now, although still within the FIA, he's gone to a different position. We've now got two race directors, I think, across the whole season, that are the same. But I think probably the biggest thing that didn't happen, that they've missed out on, and I think it's quite fundamental, is that there wasn't a rule change in terms of what happens in like the last 5 laps. I think they needed to do something where if there's a crash or an incident like that again, and it's the possibility that the race would finish under a safety car, that whether it's 5 laps or less, to stop the race, red flag it, give everyone sort of fresh set of tyres, and then go racing there. I think that's the most fairest way to do it, and for sporting integrity as well. And I know there's obviously there would be some issues around if it was a standing start, would there be then another crash within the next 5 laps? But I think they could easily do a rolling start to have the safety car come go around 1 lap and come in after, maybe have like sort of the 4-lap shootout. I think that's something they've really missed out on there, and that's probably one of the main things that would need to be changed going forward. And I think it would just add to the entertainment going forward as well.
I mean, the thing is, Jack, what annoys me the most is that I still think of Azerbaijan, where they dealt the end of that race spot on, which is all start on the grid and then go from there in the last 2 laps. And that's what I still think could have happened with Abu Dhabi, but they were just so inconsistent with the rules last season.
Yeah, that was the thing, wasn't it? And I think we use Abu Dhabi as a prime example, but there were other races and other incidents throughout the season that have sort of been put under the carpet, as it were, because the last race of the season was such a huge thing for not just in F1 in general, but because so many people were watching the sport, what maybe it be for the first time, because it was a situation that we hadn't really had before, where both drivers had the chance of it, they were level on points. it was a huge moment in sport in general. That that's why that one's been put out, and I think that's fair enough, because for my opinion it was a mistake. That what happened was sort of like an inconsistency and by a huge error, and as much as maybe it's a shame, because I think everybody's been asking for so long that Michael Massey needed somebody else in there, and now they've done that, but he's not involved anymore at all in terms of that situation, and now they've decided to bring in two people, and you look at it and they haven't really said it was a mistake to not give him any support, but because they're bringing in two people for this year, then basically that they are already highlighting that it was an error, that one guy on his own was speaking to all the team principals and having to deal with the FIA sort of like stewards all by themselves. So I feel a little bit sorry for Michael Massey, but also on the other hand, it was a mistake. And I think obviously he's probably owned up to that in behind closed doors, and that's fine. He's like Liam said, he's still got a job within the FIA, but not in view for the public. So I think obviously it's the right changes. I think they've made a slight rule change to the safety car, but just because of the lapped cars. I think have they changed it from any to all?
Yeah,
just tweaked the wording slightly, haven't they? So they've kind of made a certain like a bit of a change, but I think like Liam said, it would be a good idea sort of to do that, and like you said, Jamie, Azerbaijan was a great example of that, where we saw an incident, but yet they were all still able to go racing in the last few laps.
And Perez won. That was the greatest thing in the world.
Really, you would want that change all the time, wouldn't you, to let Perez win? But,
yeah, absolutely. Not biased here at all, folks, on Let's Talk Sport. Conor, I mean, my brother, for example, has lost faith with F1 because of what happened in that final race. Do you think F1 might have to try and win a few fans back, or do you think it's just one of those things where people forget about it in the future, just move on from it?
I think it just comes down to how these new regulations work, because if it provides really tight racing and entertaining racing, then I think naturally a lot of fans will come back to watch because of how unpredictable the sport would become once more. Whereas I think even if we come into a season now, even if it's like just Max and Hamilton battling out again, I think a lot of people will still be turned away from it, because of course, some people will be entertained by that, but ultimately a lot of people have, like you said, like your brother, have been affected by the final race, because it felt as though it was being played out for TV rather than for sporting integrity purposes. And as a result of that, the FIA has made structural changes to address it. And unfortunately, it looks as though, Michael Massey was put in a position almost and not really given the support system to help him. And like, I agree with Jack and Liam. Like, I do feel sorry for Michael Massey in that aspect. And I'm actually glad the FIA recognised that and kept him in the FIA and not outright let him go, because ultimately he was in a very high pressure position, given the fact of the stakes of the championship were on the line in that race. Plus, take into account he had Christian Horner and Toto Wolff screaming in his ear throughout the race for every decision that he made. And if you've watched Drive to Survive, the last episode, you see that play out. And of course, it's dramatized in Drive to Survive, which is a completely different story, which I won't go into. But ultimately, I think the FIA has made some good decisions in the off season to address that, including the virtual race control system, and also making sure that team officials can't communicate with race directors throughout the race, so that the race directors are in a position where they can make a decision without outside influences. And I think that's the most important thing to take away from last season, that if you've watched Drive to Survive, you can see Christian Horner saying, we only need one lap of racing. We only need one lap of racing. It makes you think sometimes, but I'm happy with some of the decisions that the FIA has made over the off season, but ultimately I think we have to wait and see how the racing on track unfolds over the next couple of weeks to see if it is going to be tight racing once more, if it is going to be what we've seen over the past couple of seasons, where one or two teams have been dominating and the rest of the pack's kind of like chasing up to them. And hopefully with the regulations of what we see, we've got a glimpse of potentially that kind of changing. But I suppose with our predictions coming up now, we'll see how we think it's all going to unfold.
Well, let's just hope that Ernie and Bert are not the new race directors of Formula One. But who knows when it comes to the FIA. Anyway, the next topic really ahead of this season was to just ask everyone who's excited for the most in terms of driver and team this year. So, for example, for me, I'd probably got to say Alonso, as long as that Alpine car is good for this season. Jack, funny enough, Martin Brundle said the other day that Fernando Alonso, he reckons he's still got one World Championship left in him. What are your thoughts on that?
I think give Fernando Alonso a good car and he can still show you what he's got. I think he is still one of the best drivers. I think he's obviously, we know he's been unfortunate. I think his driver moves have never been at the correct time. Obviously going to Ferrari when they weren't able to give him a world championship, a bit like, I mean, he had that opportunity when obviously Vettel pipped him at the post, but Vettel had the same thing where Ferrari just weren't at that level. He then went to McLaren, and again, McLaren and Honda went backwards, very much so. Like we always say, that engine was a canal boat.
It really was.
So I mean, like I said, he hasn't made the best moves at the right time in his career, but I feel like, like I say, you still give him one of the best cars, and he's still up there to challenge without a doubt. Even at the age he is now, I think, like you said, if he gets a win this year, he's almost level in terms of one of the oldest drivers to get a race win, but he's still got that in him. So I think very much so Fernando Alonso, if Alpine and like Conor said, if it is as level as we're hoping it's going to be, or a bit more of a level playing field. Obviously we saw Fernando Alonso got a podium last year. Esteban Ocon won a race for Alpine. So if it can get closer, then even better for us. I think in terms of, if I can say mine that I'm most excited for, I sort of used them last year as well, but Ferrari just weren't at that level. But I still feel like Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc are a very strong partnership, and they built that car last year and worked very well as a team. I think this year, obviously, testing has shown that Ferrari are a little bit better, but of course, as Conor mentions, testing doesn't mean a lot until you get to the first qualifying session of the first race weekend. So we'll see where Ferrari's pace really is compared to Red Bull and where Mercedes are. A lot of people are putting Mercedes backwards, but Mercedes do that every year. As we saw, they had issues at the beginning of last year as well, and testing last year, and obviously they still won the Constructors' Championship. So obviously don't take anything out so far with the predictions, but I would say Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc look very strong for Ferrari this year. So I'll probably say them that I'm most excited for as a team. So
Conor and Liam, who are you excited for?
I'll let Liam go first.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Jack definitely on the team side of things. Ferrari look really, really strong, and I would agree that I would probably say that they got if not the strongest driver lineup. Just considering how young they are, and Carlos Sainz, I don't think anyone thought he would do as well as he did in his first season in Ferrari, in outscoring Leclerc as well. So I think that they're really, really strong. For me, I think a key factor in this is going to be George Russell in the Mercedes. He's different to Valtteri Bottas. He wants to go. He wants to win. He wants to win championships. And it's not the question of will he upset Red Bull, but will he upset Lewis? How is Lewis going to cope with that? And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that sort of plays out, because Lewis isn't going to want to be a number two. If what happens if we're sort of 8 to 9 races in and George is beating him on points and wins, because you can really see it happening just because of how good a driver he is and the form he showed in the Williams. So I think that's going to be really interesting to play out, and then obviously that how he works with Lewis to combat the Red Bulls, because I think now Lewis has a teammate who is going to be right up there with him. So I think that's going to be really interesting, and I think for me the Ferraris as well as a team are really, really strong.
Conor, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, what Liam said about Lewis, that's the kind of thinking I was going down. This is the first time in I think 4 years now since we've seen Lewis enter a season without being world champion the prior season. So it's going to be interesting to see how he responds to that and how he drives, and especially with a new teammate coming in as well in George Russell, one that's hungry and is wanting to prove himself in one of the top, what we expect to be one of the top cars on the track. It's going to be interesting to see how that dynamic unfolds and what Jack mentioned about the Ferraris as well. Carlos Sainz was pushing through near the end of the season. I think he got third in Abu Dhabi, and he got a couple of podiums throughout the season as well. Monaco too. Charles Leclerc, of course, getting a podium in Britain. So those two teams are interesting to watch. The one team that I'm quite intrigued to see how they kind of do is McLaren, because Daniel Ricciardo entered that team, almost expecting to, really push the team to the next level. But overall, throughout the season, it was actually Lando that stepped up, and Daniel Ricciardo kind of was the second teammate. But now I think entering this season, I think they can both be on that same level playing field, especially with Daniel Ricciardo winning at Monza, and Lando again the second there, of course, as well. So it's going to be interesting, I think, for McLaren pushing forward, because this is a real opportunity for them to try and break into that championship fight. I think with these two talented drivers, plus with the regulation changes, if they've managed to get it right, I think we could start to see McLaren on the podium a lot more often than what we did last season, which was quite often, considering how they've struggled in the past. And with Lando continuously developing with the new contract that he got last season as well, with Daniel Ricciardo a proven race winner, it's going to be interesting to see if they can, almost essentially follow Ferrari and taking that next step up forward and become, a title challenger once more, whether it be in the constructors or in the actual title itself. Like Ferrari, can McLaren take advantage of the new regulations that have come in this season? That's my team to watch, really. That's the team I'm excited for, to see how Lando and Daniel Ricciardo do in that. Is it a papaya orange? I'm not too sure. I'm trying to think what the colour chart would be in B&Q for that orange car. I don't know.
To be fair, they missed a trick not doing the golf livery again that they did in Monaco. Because watching that episode back, I was like,
it was beautiful.
Really need to do that. But I'm glad
the caps as well.
I'm glad you segued into McLaren, Conor, because Jamie doesn't like Daniel Ricciardo, so I was waiting for him to say something, but he did hold his nerve there. So.
No, I don't. I mean, as a Perez fan, I felt betrayed by McLaren all those years ago. So, but yeah, I'm excited for Perez this season. Anyway,
is that literally your prediction? Is it just Perez?
It's just Perez. Everything. Who will finish last? Perez. Who will win? Perez.
Have you not got anybody else? Come on.
In a bit. In terms of outside Mercedes and Red Bull, then, I mean, we don't know who's going to finish top this year. It could be very different to last season with these new regulations. We could see a Brawn GP 2.0. Who knows? But Jack, in terms of outside Mercedes and Red Bull, which team do you reckon could improve this year?
I mean, I think we've said, I mean, there are a whole list. I mean, I would love to see Alpine and Aston Martin a little bit higher this year, but I still feel like, as much as it's a new regulation change, I still feel like they won't be as high as, say, McLaren and Ferrari in terms of pushing Red Bull and Mercedes. I hope I'm wrong, because I hope there are more teams. I hope we have that year. Was it 2011? No, it was 2012, where we had multiple teams winning races in the first 6 races.
First 7 races.
Like.
Yeah,
exactly.
That was beautiful.
I would like that in terms of it once again, but I'm still unsure into how much the change of this year is actually going to be the case, because it could be, as we saw when Mercedes started this turbo hybrid era, they just ran away with it. So it may just be that we have one team that does that again. I hope that's not the case, and obviously that they've gone through the regulations just to try and benefit everybody, but we don't know until the season starts. But I feel like we're going to go back onto it again, that if we're not picking Red Bull or Mercedes, it's either Ferrari or McLaren. I think as much as I'm a McLaren fan, I would put my bets towards Ferrari being stronger this year. I would say, Daniel Ricciardo obviously is in his second season at McLaren, a bit like Carlos Sainz, but like Liam said, Carlos headed into that team a lot quicker, understood the car a lot quicker, and even beat, as he said, Charles Leclerc, who absolutely flattened Vettel the year before. So yeah. I think the team itself, I think if they are as good as they looked in testing, then I think Ferrari hopefully will be challenging Red Bull and Mercedes throughout the year. So I think I have to keep going back. As much as I'm not a huge Ferrari fan, I have to keep going back and saying they look good this year.
Conor, I mean, maybe would you say the surprise could be McLaren for you then, or is there someone else up there? I mean, Haas did a bit of fun in testing. You know, they got Magnussen fastest, but again, that might not mean anything.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to go with Haas because I actually think they're going to score some points this year.
Oh wow!
I think Magnussen, he's coming back to sport with a point to prove. Mick Schumacher's looking to take the next step up and prove to be one for the future. And this is a big season for Mick. The second season now. He's no longer a rookie in the sport. It's time to push forward and get some points on the board. We got 12th last season, I think, in Hungary. When all the cars crashed out in the first corner, took advantage of that and had a great performance in that race. If he's able to kind of replicate that going forward into this season, I think Haas could be a surprise package. And I think Haas will move away from that 0 point mark and pick up some points this season. And I'm not too sure how many, but I think that they've got a nice driver lineup, and the car, at least when it comes to that speed, they proved it's got the speed at the test, so it could see them, push forwards, Q2 and potentially maybe even a surprise Q3 performance a couple of race weekends. So it might be ambitious to say, they're going to be consistent top 10 finishes, but I think, they're going to get some points on the board this season.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just because I think obviously Ferrari making good gains as well in terms of their performance only helps Haas, being a customer team as well. So I think it's it's definitely a good thing, and nice to see Kevin Magnussen back. I have to say that as much as I wasn't his biggest fan when he was in the sport, actually it was a shame to miss him last year, and I think coming back, as you say, Conor has got a point to prove, and obviously won't want to lose to Mick Schumacher this year. But again, like you said, Mick Schumacher's not in his rookie season now, and again, would like to beat an experienced man like Kevin Magnussen in the sport as well. So I think Gunter's he hopefully won't be swearing as much this year as he has been the last 3 as we've seen.
He'll be saying that they look like rock stars. That's what he'd be saying, because he's getting points all the time. So there you go.
I think last season also helped Mick a lot as well, in terms of he knew where Haas were. That gave him a season to embed into the F1 what it's like to drive a Formula One car. They knew they weren't going to get points, and it gave him a great deal of experience. And I think, especially going forward, he's got the talent. He won the F2 championship a couple of seasons ago, so he knows he can mix it with the best. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how they do.
I mean, I feel for Gunther Steiner because, his stress levels probably went a lot lower last season. But the moment Magnussen comes back, that's at least half the stress levels going back up from the year before. So I look forward to Drive to Survive Series 5 when he throws him out of his office again. So anyway, we'll move on, and I'll ask you all right now, who will win the Constructors' Championship? Who wants to go first? Because it's such an open one, isn't it, when it's a season with new regulations?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, my thought is Red Bull, and I'm thinking Red Bull because this season the changes that have been made seem to be more aerodynamic focused than they are sort of power focused. And when you think of who they've got in their engineering capabilities, in Adrian Newey, who's probably if not one of the greatest engineers in the sport, and what they do with the car aerodynamically, you kind of think that Red Bull have the upper hand. What I would account to that is what we've seen with Mercedes previously, is that it's going to be a year where development is going to be key, and over the course of the season, Mercedes are very good at developing quickly when they need to. But yeah, I think Red Bull will look like they have the upper hand, especially in testing, and I think they will probably just about edge it, but it's going to be very close. And I think Ferrari's certainly going to be in the mix, and McLaren, if they can develop well as well, I think they'll be close there too. But yeah, I think Red Bull just edge it.
What does everyone think of Liam's response then? Who have you got on your hands there, Jack?
I'm going to go the opposite of Liam, but I'm going to make exactly the same points. And I think every point he made was absolutely spot on, but I'm going to go Mercedes because I feel like Red Bull need to start off well. I think if Red Bull start off well, then obviously they are in sort of like the driving seat. I think they needed to do that last year, and we obviously saw Hamilton win the first race. And as you see from obviously the first episodes of Drive to Survive, they're already thinking, oh God, here we go again. So I feel like Red Bull need to make a good start. I think if they do that, then that's that's only a good thing. But you see what Mercedes can do in terms of development from Barcelona to Bahrain in that 2 weeks between the two tests. They changed their car completely. So as Liam said, they're so good at making developments. If they make a mistake, they're pretty quick to rectify that and progress through the season. So I'm going still with Mercedes because I feel like if they make a slip up, they're very quick and clever to rectify that issue and continue. Like we said, they looked off the pace at the beginning of last year and they still won the Constructors' Championship. So it might be a bit more difficult this year because obviously the second driver will be battling the first driver more than what we've saw with Hamilton and Bottas, I think. So maybe the team dynamic changes a little bit there. And as Liam says, that's what might help Red Bull because we all know, sorry, Jamie, Perez is the second driver. So I feel maybe the team dynamic changes a little bit in terms of that between Mercedes and Red Bull. But I still feel like for this year, at least, I'm still going to give it to Mercedes, but just.
If Mercedes do, I think it'll be 8 in a row in terms of constructors championships, that's nearly the equivalent of Juventus.
9 in a row, is it?
Oh, is it 9? Oh my! I can't count to save my life because they first won in 2014, didn't they? And then it's been that ever since. But yeah, I mean, it's literally the equivalent of Bayern Munich in the Bundesliga at this rate. But yeah, it should be interesting. I mean, Conor, have you got another team or have you got Mercedes or Red Bull in your mind?
No, I'm going to double down on what Liam said with Red Bull. I just think Perez stepped up at the end of the season.
Thank you.
And started delivering a lot more for
pay him
Red
later,
Bull. Hang on a second, guys. I just got a PayPal message in.
If HMRC ask, it's a friendly income.
Brilliant.
No, I'm just joking. Perez, he stepped up completely at the end of the season. Got a couple of podiums as well, and I think that's going to carry over into the next season. Now he's more comfortable with the car, and I think that will end up paying well and paying forward for Red Bull in their hunt to get a constructors championship once more. I think Max is obviously going to perform, but I think crucially, we're going to see a lot more consistency when it comes to podiums from Perez throughout the duration of the season. So I'm going to go for Red Bull as well.
Interesting. So 2 for Red Bull and 1 for Mercedes. And we go to the ultimate prize, the one that everyone wants to win, and that is the Drivers' Championship. Verstappen last year, Hamilton for a good few years before him. Alonso has got 2, Vettel has got 4. So we've got a few world champions in the mix there. Sadly, no Kimi Raikkonen this year. It's our first season without him. Kind of like MotoGP without Valentino Rossi. Very sad times. But come on then, who's going to go for Drivers' Championship then?
Liam, do you want to start again?
Well, okay, yeah. Okay, so I think for me, I'm going the opposite of what it was last year. So obviously, Verstappen won last year, Mercedes won the Constructors. I think Red Bull win Constructors, and I think Lewis will win it this year. I think Hamilton will. I think just everything that happened on that last race of the season, he'll be determined to right the wrongs, and he'll want that 8th championship. And I think he'll also know that with Russell coming in and him getting older and the younger drivers coming through in the other teams as well, that he's not going to get too many more chances to win and get that elusive 8th title. And I think this is probably going to be his one of his last chances to do it. And he'll really use motivation from last year to do that.
And Lewis Hamilton did that after he lost to Nico Rosberg. If anything, he got even better.
Yeah, but I'm not going to go for Lewis with my driver's prediction.
Ooh.
And I'm not going for Max either.
Kevin Magnussen.
No, I think Ferrari are going to make a comeback.
Ooh.
A new champion in Charles Leclerc. I think he's going to step up this season. Of course, he's got 2 race wins under his belt, and technically he could have almost got a 3rd at his home Grand Prix if it wasn't for, of course, ruining that gearbox. We know how difficult it is to overtake at Monaco, and that's why he looked as though he was favourite on to win that race if he had started it and managed to finish it. But I think this is what we've seen and tested. I think at the very least, Ferrari are going to be up there when it comes to competing in Q3 and getting those crucial crucial front row spots, which could be helpful for them in both the constructors' challenge and in the drivers' challenge. But I think ultimately, one of the two Ferrari drivers is going to really push and challenge for the drivers' championship, and I think that guy is going to be Charles Leclerc. We've already seen so much talent from him since he came into Formula One, and I think this season with the new regulation changes, there's going to be an opening for someone outside of the Red Bull and Mercedes fight to come into this challenge and really push for a drivers' championship. And I think that guy might be Charles Leclerc, so I'm going to go for Charles Leclerc.
Interesting.
Well, I'm not going for as bold a claim as Conor. I wish I was, but now I wished I'd gone second, because that would have been a great one to end on. In terms of mine, I'm gonna go once again opposite to Liam, but hear me out. So I'm I think if Lewis Hamilton wins it, I think like Liam said, I think it would be a great way. He'll be more like you said, he'll be more determined than he was last year, obviously with the way it ended. I think if he did win it this year, he might consider retirement. That could be a thing to look at, because I think it was. I'm probably the only one that takes anything out of it, but there was a video that Bottas did with Mercedes in the second to last race of the season or something, when they were looking at Abu Dhabi, and Toto Wolff said, you can have your little sabbatical at Alfa Romeo and then we'll see what happens after that. So my thing was, maybe they expect Lewis to win the championship this year, he then retires, and they have Russell and Bottas as a partnership going forward. But that was probably me that only took that because maybe they want Bottas as second driver and Russell being dominant again. But in terms of going back to like predictions, I think for me it would still be obviously Mercedes to win the constructors, but I feel like Max Verstappen will win the drivers' championship again. I just feel like Red Bull he'll be as stronger again as he was last year, and ultimately I think with the backlash that he's had, a lot of people still feel like it was Lewis Hamilton's title. So I think he'll truly want to be the one where they say, okay, you did win the world championship. This was a clean slate. This was your actual championship. Because obviously it still is a world championship, but people still are obviously going to be talking about that situation. I bet he's had a lot of comments over the off season about it. So I feel like he'll be as determined as Lewis Hamilton to make sure he secures another world championship and to make it an official, a proper one. There was no issues, no controversies. It was just a clean season from Verstappen. I think it'd be very difficult considering Max Verstappen doesn't have a clean season. There's always something that goes on with Max Verstappen. There's always controversy around anything he does on the racetrack. But I feel like he will be as strong as Lewis Hamilton this year to make sure he secures a second one. Because if he's like any of the other previous world championships, one's not enough for a driver. He'll want that second one as well. So yeah, don't rule out Max Verstappen this year.
I'm going to go with mine, and I'm going to go for Verstappen to win it. I honestly think from last season, that's what he needed to help his dominance, because I actually think Verstappen pushed that Red Bull beyond the limit, and Christian Horner kept stressing throughout the season that the Red Bull is good, but it's not as fast as a Mercedes, and yet Verstappen is probably the only driver... Well, actually, yeah. Verstappen's the only driver outside of Mercedes that has been able to actually push Mercedes to the limit in terms of actually having a different driver from a different team go for the world title, which he beat him to. I know people can say the ending wasn't fair and stuff towards Hamilton, but let's talk about throughout the whole season. If Verstappen's car hadn't packed up in Azerbaijan, this World Championship would have been decided before the final race, for example. So it's just little things like that where I just feel like Verstappen's actually just becoming this dominant driver. I honestly think this season is his season again, and I think Red Bull will miss out on the constructors. I think Mercedes will get it, but I think Verstappen will get the World Championship. Perez to finish third in the Drivers' Championship. Very proud of him, but I don't think he'll be as good as Hamilton. So a bit of a boring prediction, but I find it very hard to go against Verstappen after the way he drove last season. I think that is it, folks. So I think what I might have to do is rewatch this ending and write our predictions down. Then come the end of the season, we'll have to come back here and then see if we were right. And as you can see, Conor is very much adamant. He's even paid for that cap and has got Charles Leclerc on his cap as well. So, I mean, if Charles Leclerc...
Carlos Sainz one by the end of the season when he wins.
No. Conor will be saying, no, it was a different number. What are you talking about? I didn't have 16 on the cap. Brilliant. But anyway, I think before we go, just a little cheeky plug-in. We do have our first race watch-along this Sunday at 3 o'clock. Jack will be there. I believe Conor will be there. Liam, I haven't even asked him yet. I'm asking him on air if he wants to join. It's up to him, but...
I might be there.
It might be. That's a maybe. He's hanging on the fence. But we'll find out. But anyway, thanks to the lads for joining us. And yes, bring on the new season where, of course, another World Series of races will happen. And we look forward to it between now and when it finishes the day before the FIFA World Cup. It finishes a lot earlier this year, the F1, on the 20th of November, I think it is. So put those dates down on your diary. Anyway, from all of us here, thank you and good night. And for any of you who have got BBC One, I hope you enjoy the Apprentice interviews in a bit. See you later.